Clive Barker is one of the most fascinating creatives in the horror genre. You would probably recognize him as the person who wrote and directed Hellraiser. And while Hellraiser would go on to be an iconic horror franchise with a wonderfully terrifying lead villain, Pinhead, a lot of people might not know that Barker was primarily an author. He wrote quite a few novels and novellas, including The Hellbound Heart, which was turned into Hellraiser, and also The Thief of Always, which is one of my personal favorite children's horror books. But maybe my favorite thing that he has ever released are his books of blood. And these are 6 volumes of horror short stories, novelettes, and novellas. And a lot of these short stories are super messed up and gory and gross and wonderful in all the ways that I like them, but they're also incredibly inventive, insightful, and interesting. And today I will be covering volume 1 of the Books of Blood. This volume contains 6 stories: The Book of Blood, The Midnight Meat Train, The Yattering and Jack, Pig Blood Blues, Sex, Death, and Starshine, and In the Hills, The Cities. Now, from hearing some of those titles, you may have gathered that this video isn't going to be quite family appropriate. There was a lot of sex and murder in these stories. So if you're not interested in hearing about people being eviscerated or having their tongues ripped out of their mouths or demons or sex, then I would skip this video. I won't be talking about any of the sexual content explicitly because my mom sometimes watches these and I don't want YouTube to nuke my channel either. But I will be referencing some more extreme violence and sexual acts because they are used as a method to explore characters and themes that are crucial to Clive Barker's work. In that way, I wouldn't call anything in this book or in this video gratuitous. Like, none of the violence or sex feels like it's there to shock you. It's all in service of the larger horror and themes that Barker is building to. I've heard some people refer to Barker's work as splatterpunk, and I would personally have to disagree with that because splatterpunk is kind of proudly gratuitous. That's kind of the point of the genre. But to me, the main attraction of the stories in the Books of Blood is the sheer inventiveness of the horror found in each story. So even if you don't like extreme horror, I think you'll really like these stories. My hope is to make 6 videos in this particular series, each video covering one of the 6 volumes. I've already read all 6 volumes and I really loved every story found in them, so I'm very excited to talk about them. Full spoilers ahead for all of the first volume of Books of Blood. I will be doing an in-depth summary of what happens in each story, and then giving my thoughts along the way and doing some analysis at the end of each story. I highly recommend that you check these out if these sound interesting to you, and then come back and watch this video later. But if you want to watch me talk about the first volume and you think it sounds awesome, then you can go read volumes 2 through 6, and you'll have a ton of fun with those, and you can even reread volume 1 because it's just great to go through it on your own. Also, sorry if you can hear like the sounds of somebody mowing their lawn. It's the first nice day in a long time in Washington where I live, and so literally everybody is outside mowing their lawns right now. And as always, if you haven't subscribed yet, then please do. I talk about horror literature and would love to have you here in my awesome community. Thank you guys all so much for watching, and let's get into it. The Book of Blood. The dead have highways. They run, unerring lines of ghost trains, of dream carriages, across the wasteland beyond our lives, bearing an endless traffic of departed souls. Their thrum and throb can be heard in the broken places of the world, through cracks made by acts of cruelty, violence, and depravity. Their freight, the wandering dead, can be glimpsed when the heart is close to bursting, and sights that should be hidden come plainly into view. They have signposts, these highways, and bridges and lay-bys. They have turnpikes and intersections. It is at these intersections, where the crowds of dead mingle and cross, that this forbidden highway is most likely to spill through into our world. The traffic is heavy at the crossroads, and the voices of the dead are at their most shrill. Here, the barriers that separate one reality from the next are worn thin with the passage of innumerable feet. Those are the first couple paragraphs of this story, and you can already see why I find Barker's writing to be so fascinating. It's all very haunting and dark and all very beautiful. This beginning gives us a glimpse at the highways of the dead that exist in a parallel plane of existence to our own, where the dead walk around and go about their business. And at the intersections of these highways are where the dead all congregate, and as they swarm together, the barrier between our world and theirs starts to weaken. It's a really unique explanation as to how something could be haunted, and it's the perfect backdrop for the setting of our story, number 65, Tollington Place. This house has seen many different tenants come and go, with anyone staying too long succumbing to madness, not due to the mold in the basement, but the thinness of the barrier between our world and the world of the dead. So it also makes for the perfect location to study paranormal activity, some of which has been reported by a skinny, pale man named McNeil. Every day, the dead enter the second story of the bedroom of the house and begin to write messages all over the walls in charcoal. They write their death dates and their birth dates and how they died. They write shopping lists and draw pictures and give strange cryptic clues as to what the afterlife might be like, so naturally, Dr. Florescu, a paranormal researcher, has come to investigate. At the start of the story, she's been examining the house and recording the paranormal activity for 3 weeks already with her assistant, a man named Fuller. Florescu has had many people claim to witness paranormal activity, but she has never been able to prove any of it for herself. But this house was different. She wasn't allowed to be in the bedroom when the spirits arrived to write their drawings. They would only come in if McNeil was there, so he would stay up there until it happened. Florescu would follow the same routine every day. She would wait until 6 p.m., hear the knocking and banging from upstairs, and then see what the spirits had written on the wall and capture it in photographic and video evidence. We then shift to McNeil's perspective, the guy that's reporting all of this paranormal activity and who lives in the house. And honestly, this guy is kind of the worst. But that's also kind of a common theme throughout these stories. He's just like a dirty and gross guy. He's also kind of a pervert, go figure. And to top it all off, he's lying about everything involving the spirits. Although Florescu makes sure he enters the bedroom with nothing but his boxers, he hides the charcoal piece under his tongue. And then at around 6 every night, he just takes the charcoal out and starts to write on the walls and bang around so it sounds like the spirits have arrived and they're doing their thing. But things go a little bit different this night. He's sitting up there waiting and touching himself, because of course he is, and downstairs, Florescu is also waiting and thinking about her life. As she thinks about her dead husband, she starts to feel something in the air change, and she starts to feel like everything around her is humming, and she feels great, like she's in this ecstasy state. She looks at her assistant and starts to feel something like a full body high. She says the air around her is embracing her and caressing her, and she can feel something changing in the air. Then her head is abruptly pulled back by an invisible force that leaves her staring at the ceiling, and there is now a hole in the ceiling where she can see through to McNeil touching himself in the room above. It's here where we find out that she's been secretly lusting after McNeil, and this combination of love, passion, and desire and loss is opening a portal to the land of the dead. She realizes what exactly she's doing and she tries to stop it, but it's too late at this point. The portal has been opened and the dead start to spill through, and they appear as kind of these rotting, ethereal corpses in the house. Fuller, the assistant, can't see any of this. He just sees Florescu with her head pulled backwards in an unnatural position, and he attempts to make her snap out of it, but he can't. Florescu realizes that she can't stop what's happening, and so she invites the dead into her world, and Fuller panics, runs to the door of the bedroom, opens it, and he sees the highways of the dead. Not being able to comprehend what he is seeing, his body and mind starts to break, and his bowels fail and his limbs go numb as his face is essentially cooked alive by an unseen force. He blisters and cooks and falls to the ground, still jerking around even after he dies, and inside the room, the vengeful dead corner and grab McNeil, a member of the boy upstairs, and they hold him down. They then all begin to carve things into his flesh, and they start to inscribe these stories all over him, forming deep cuts and using his blood as their ink to tell these stories, and he just screams in agony the entire time. They tattoo their stories in blood and flesh all over his body, not leaving a single bit of flesh untouched, and then they leave him on the ground, ugly and scarred and in horrible pain. Florescu enters the room and sees McNeil on the ground, and she goes over to him and touches the writing on his bloody skin, and it's already starting to heal, and she knows that he will survive. And the story ends by telling us that the carvings on McNeil's skin are the books of blood that we will be reading from throughout the rest of this collection of short stories. I think this is super cool. I love when a collection of short stories gives some context as to why it exists. A good example of this in film are the VHS anthology movies. All of these stories in this collection are good enough on their own, and they don't really need any framing device to elevate them, but I'm glad that Barker went the extra mile to include this story, this introduction. It has everything that you would want from one of his stories. You have passion and lust and horrifying violence and agony coming to multiple characters. It really checks all the boxes. But now that we know where all of these stories come from, let's dive into the first proper full-length story found in this volume, The Midnight Meat Train. This is a story that some of you might be familiar with, and I talked about it a little in my Disturbing Short Stories iceberg video. It also has a movie adaptation that I haven't seen yet. We follow a detective named Leon Kaufman, a man who has just recently moved from Atlanta to New York City, and he always dreamed of living there, but he's now grown disillusioned with the city. He once saw it as a beacon of industry and hope, and now he has seen the seedy underbelly of New York, and he has fallen out of love with the idea of living there. The story starts with Kaufman on the hunt for a serial killer that has recently cropped up, the Subway Killer. His victims have been found in subway cars late at night. Kaufman goes to investigate a new crime scene, and he finds the body of a man hanging from the ceiling of the subway car, His stomach has been sliced open and he has been partially disemboweled. Something about the scene makes Kaufman feel like the killer left in a hurry. His other victims weren't encountered in such a sloppy, messy state. The first victim was discovered late at night by a German tourist. It was a woman who had been found stripped completely naked and hanging from the ceiling of a subway car. She had all of the hair on her body removed, tweezed out by the looks of it, and her clothes had been neatly folded and placed, each of them in an individual plastic bag next to her. Her entire stomach and chest had been opened and her organs had been removed. There was a bucket underneath her to carefully collect her blood, and she had not been sexually assaulted. And all of these practices resemble a way that an animal would be butchered, so Kaufman and the rest of the police in the city figured their murderer was a butcher. They found persons of interest from meatpacking plants and contacted local butchers, but they were unable to find the subway killer and everybody's alibi checked out. The city officials attempted to keep these killings away from the press, but a police officer had leaked it and soon everybody knew, and he figures they would have figured it all out sooner or later, so it's not that big of a deal. But since the body of the first woman was found on the subway, 3 more killings have been discovered, all of them with the exact same method of killing, gutting, and then draining the blood. However, this particular killing seemed to be sloppier. The body was found by a journalist, but the hairs hadn't been tweezed out, and it looked like the killer was getting sloppier. So now, with the entire town aware of the killings, Kaufman sits at a cafe and reads the newspaper, and his server tells him that he thinks the killer is a cop trying to be a hero. Kaufman is a pretty bristly character. He's nice enough to the people that he interacts with, but he doesn't seem too fond of the people of New York. He hides that disdain pretty well, though. We then shift to the perspective of a man named Mahogany who wakes up at 6 p.m. and looks down at the people of the city. Mahogany is the subway killer, and the story doesn't even try to hide it. But something interesting about him is that he feels that he has been chosen by a group called the Fathers to carry out these brutal murders on the subway. He loves the work that he does, and he doesn't even require payment. He just serves these mysterious fathers. The issue is that he's getting old and less careful, and he needs to be replaced. He needs to take on an apprentice. He decides that he is going to take on an apprentice, but he doesn't know who quite yet, and he gets his butchering tools ready and sets out to do his job for the night. I think the framing of knowing who our killer is right away and revealing that he sees it as more of an occupation rather than doing it for pleasure is really fascinating. Barker has a tendency to reveal aspects of the story that you think should have been built up to, only to build up to something even more insane at the end, and I really love it. That's what this story is doing. Mahogany heads out to the subway station and spends the next couple of hours looking for the ideal victim, and we learn that these killings have a ritualistic aspect to them. He reads the newspaper and sees that the police are out searching for the subway killer, and he notably thinks to himself that he doesn't need to worry about the police at all. He says that he is protected from every professional institution and could never go to prison. He would be bailed out by the people at the top every single time, and he is untouchable. We then go to Kaufman, who has been working late at his office, and he decides to head home for the night and gets on the subway, not knowing that he's on the same line as Mahogany. And neither of the two men are aware that at that very moment, the police think they have captured the subway killer, a crazed man who attempted to attack a lady on the subway with a hammer. He was disarmed by the lady, who then took his hammer and completely destroyed his lower jaw, and he is now in police custody, but they can't understand what he's saying with his broken jaw. So all of the police force has been diverted away to that other subway line to deal with what they think is the subway killer, while the real killer sits on a relatively empty line with Kaufman a few cars down from him. Kaufman sees a young man get on the subway and sit down in the car next to him before he drifts off to sleep. He wakes up and swears he can hear the sound of one of the connecting doors between the cars opening and closing. He gets up and looks into the car next to him, and he sees that the young man is gone. And the train stops at another station and no one gets on, but Kaufman hears the connecting door open again. He hears the sound of clothing being torn and heads into the next car, where he finds a trail of blood leading to the connecting door to the next car, and he peeks through the windows and faints. While he's unconscious, he misses the conductor saying that everyone has to get off the train now because the train has finished its route for the night. But this train isn't following a usual route. It isn't normal to dump all of its passengers so soon, because this isn't a normal train. This is the Midnight Meat Train. Kaufman wakes up and finds himself under the row of seats on the train and hidden out of view. Someone either shoved him down there, or the movement of the train slid his body underneath the seats. He decides to stay hidden underneath the seats and collects himself, and he hears the door open and sees the butcher enter the train and walk to the door on the other side. Mahogany is a little disappointed because he was hoping to absolutely butcher the sleeping man in the car, who we know to be Kaufman, but now he thinks that man has gotten off at the last station. Mahogany continues through the cars until he reaches the conductor's compartment, and Kaufman gets up and follows behind him, and he sees him approach the conductor and he braces for the worst. But the conductor and Mahogany just strike up a friendly conversation, and Kaufman is in awe at the fact that the conductor is fully aware of the actions of the subway killer and seems complicit in it. He decides to go back and check on the car that holds the dead bodies, and he sees that the subway killer has killed 4 people tonight and butchered them like usual. He sees that the bodies are all hanging neatly from the ceiling, and he circles around to the back of one of the female victims to see that her back has been completely sliced open. Her muscles have been pulled away to reveal her spine, and Kaufman can see that whoever the butcher is, he's good at his job. The bodies have been prepared to be used as meat. As he's inspecting the bodies, the lights in the train go out suddenly, and he falls against one of the butchered bodies in horror, and then he hears someone making their way through the cars. Kaufman scrambles and looks for a weapon that he can use, and he sees a large knife laying on the ground near one of the corpses, and he picks it up as Mahogany enters the car. The two men look at each other, and Kaufman notes that he is intimidated by the size of Mahogany's massive cleaver compared to his small knife. Make of that symbolism what you will. Mahogany tells Kaufman that he should have left the train, but it's not all that bad because now Kaufman will be used as meat to feed the fathers of the city. He swings the cleaver at Kaufman, who dodges, and the blade sinks into one of the hanging corpses, and while trying to pull the cleaver out, Kaufman stabs Mahogany in the neck. This kills Mahogany. It's really that quick. Something that I personally love about Barker's writing is that while he writes about some absolutely insane things, it all feels weirdly grounded. The actions that these characters take throughout the story make sense and they feel realistic. These two don't have an action set piece of a fight. One just stabs the other and kills him. With the butcher dead, the train comes to a halt and the conductor speaks over the intercom saying that they'll be leaving in 30 minutes and the doors open. An unbelievably bad smell fills the train car, and Kaufman covers his face with his hand. He then sees dozens of figures making their way into the train cars. These figures appear to be human, but they are bald, emaciated, and filthy, and some of them wear rudimentary clothing made of human skin, and they enter the car and find the corpses. Kaufman grabs the cleaver to defend himself, but the husks don't pay any attention to him. They just go straight for the dead bodies and begin to caress them with their fingers. Kaufman remarks that these husks seem to almost get some sort of sexual pleasure from touching the dead bodies, and then they begin to eat them, including the recently killed butcher. Kaufman is obviously shocked and grossed out by this, and one of the creatures turns towards him and tells him that eating the raw, dead bodies of other humans is no less gross for them than it is for Kaufman. He asks what they are, and he says that they are the city fathers. They were the people that originally built the city of New York, the bakers and mechanics and politicians and engineers. They are immortal and have been reduced to this state of filth and suffering and hunger that can only be satiated by eating human remains, and he says that Kaufman must bring them more meat. They direct him to exit the train, and he follows the stairs of the platform and comes face to face with the father of fathers, the being that controls all of New York, the first father. It was giant, without head or limb, without a feature that was analogous to human, without an organ that made sense or senses. If it was like anything, it was like a shoal of fish, 1,000 snouts all moving in unison, budding, blossoming, and withering rhythmically. It was iridescent, like mother of pearl, but it was sometimes deeper than any color Kaufman knew or could put a name to. That is the description that we get of this terrifying creature, just enough to make your imagination run wild, but not quite clear enough to fully understand what it is. Clive Barker is truly one of the most imaginative authors that I've ever seen. Every single one of these stories has some incredibly unique creature or idea. It's all remarkable. Kaufman looks down from the creature, unable to comprehend what he is seeing, and he sees the head of the butcher at his feet, and it's been flayed and partially eaten. He walks back to the train, and one of the husks stops him and tells him that he will serve them as their new butcher, and Kaufman looks at the cleaver in his hand and he starts to speak. The creature puts his hand into Kaufman's mouth and tells him that he will serve in silence. He then grabs Kaufman's tongue and rips it out of his mouth and then eats it in front of him. Kaufman stumbles into the midnight meat train and throws up, and he lays on the ground and cries silently. He's bleeding out and he wishes to die after all that he has seen, and he faints again. He is woken up by the conductor, who tries his best to get rid of some of the blood in Kaufman's mouth, which has glued his lips shut, and he tells him that he has a job to do. Kaufman steps out of the subway into a completely pristine white subway station. Workers rush into the train and start cleaning the seats and removing the bodies inside. He sees that this station is specific to the midnight meat train and that all of these workers are in on the whole thing, and they give him encouraging looks and say that the fathers are pleased with him. Kaufman climbs the stairs out of the station and sees that it's now morning in New York City. He sees people walking around, unaware of the city fathers and what hides below the surface. He falls to the ground and kisses the concrete, devoting himself wholly to the city and the fathers on which it is built. And that's the end of The Midnight Meat Train. I really like this story. I think it's just gruesome enough without feeling gratuitous, and it also introduces some interesting lore. All of these stories are self-contained, and each of them set up some really interesting worlds that feel like they could be expanded into full-length novels. The idea of the city fathers is really cool to me. These like bizarre husks that eat innocent people and secretly direct everything that happens in the city. I think there are a bunch of different ways you could interpret the fathers as a metaphor. They could be like representative of the blood and death that goes into building a society. Every metropolis is built by people that are long gone and most likely suffered in order to establish something that they would never fully see the fruits of. It could also be playing with the idea that those on the top of the food chain are the people that take the most from the average citizen, depicting the elite of New York as these crazed husks that literally eat the poor and unfortunate in order to sustain themselves, and the local government and the police are in on it. Those are just two possible readings that I'm thinking of. I'm not saying that I agree with them or that those were the intentions of Barker when he wrote the story. I just think it's fun and healthy to like think of possible messages that any piece of literature is trying to communicate, even if they're wrong. I've seen a growing trend where people are so eager to have the correct interpretation to a piece of art that they become kind of hostile towards any theory that deviates from the norm. I personally love looking at different theories for books and short stories and seeing which ones I agree with and which ones I don't. I think that makes discussing literature so fun. So none of the analysis that I do in this video or on this channel is intended to be viewed as like the definitive depiction of something. I love to hear other theories and I love to see where I might have gone wrong. All that is to say that almost all of Barker's work is intended to be interpreted in a number of different ways, and they will evoke different emotions and different interpretations depending on the reader. That's why I always encourage you guys to read these stories yourselves, even after you've heard me talk about them, because you might come away with something completely different. But anyways, I love The Midnight Meat Train. It's the first proper full-length story in the Books of Blood, and it's a great way to start things off, brutal and mystifying all at once. The Yattering and Jack. This story has a completely different tone from the one that came before it. It's a little more goofy in my opinion, but I love it all the same. This one starts from the perspective of a demon, and this demon is named the Yattering, and he has been assigned to torment a man named Jack Polo. The issue is that Jack Polo is a really boring guy who can't seem to be bothered by anything that the Yattering does to him, and he just kind of shrugs it all off. So the Yattering is constantly trying to offload Jack onto another lesser demon, like someone trying to pass off a bad client to their coworker. It's kind of hilarious. This whole story is actually just really funny. It's easily the funniest story that Barker includes in the Books of Blood. It's a nice change of pace from the horror of The Midnight Meat Train. But anyways, the Yattering is a low-level demon, so he is stuck with Jack Polo. Jack is a pickle importer who lives a very normal life by all accounts. We learn that it's forbidden for the demons to outright kill the people they're trying to torment. They're only supposed to make them suffer and then submit to their wills. We learn that Jack's wife cheated on him, and when he found out, he simply said, "These things happen," and he often uses the phrase, "Que sera, sera," meaning whatever will be, will be. His wife leaves him more out of frustration at his apathy rather than to pursue her lover, and she ends up killing herself by jumping off a tall building. The Yattering thought that he saw an opening with the grief that Jack would surely feel over his dead wife, but this didn't seem to bother him all that much. And now the house is empty during the day until Jack gets home, and the Yattering is constantly bored. He is bound to the house, and he's only protected while he's inside Jack's house. But when Jack gets home, the games start anew. The Yattering prevents his key from working in the lock, but Jack is able to get it to work eventually, resisting the influence of the demon. The Yattering starts to swing the lamps around like a poltergeist, and Jack just shrugs his shoulders and says, "Que sera, sera." He goes to take a shower and he finds that the Yattering has squirted toothpaste in the toilet and has clogged the shower drain with wet toilet paper, and Jack just calmly cleans it up. As he showers, the Yattering hangs invisible from the shower rod and whispers horrible things into his ear. This is apparently a common trick by the demons to make people go crazy. But like always, it doesn't seem to bother Jack, and this goes on for months, and the Yattering starts to grow frustrated and depressed, and he can't stand being around Jack any longer. In order to get a reaction from him, he boils the water in Jack's fish tank, and it doesn't even seem like Jack notices. The Yattering sits down and he starts to cry in frustration. The Yattering has had enough, so he breaks one of the rules of being a minor demon, and he appears in front of his master, the greater demon, Beelzebub. He says that he wants to die, to fade away and be replaced by another demon, and Beelzebub tells him that he isn't allowed to do that and that he has to break Jack Polo. The Yattering asks why Jack is so important and is told that Jack's mother promised her soul to the devil, but then cheated hell by dying in the arms of a priest and then being escorted to heaven. So now Jack Polo belongs to the devil, and the Yattering has to torment him throughout his life. and the Yattering appears back in Jack's apartment, and he throws his cat in the fire in a fit of rage. Over the next 2 weeks, Jack just gets a couple more cats to replace the ones that the Yattering keeps killing over and over again, and whenever one dies, he simply repeats his saying, "Que sera, sera." When Jack returns home one day and sees that his newest cat has also been killed, he seems upset for a moment, but then he just blames it on the dogs. The Yattering is elated to see his frustration, and he starts to slam all the doors in the house and tear up Jack's pillow, and Jack simply cleans the cat up and goes to sleep without his pillow. A couple weeks later, Jack's 2 daughters come to visit for Christmas, and the Yattering is excited because he plans to use the daughters to his advantage. He plans on tormenting them. But when they arrive, the Yattering is troubled to see that both Gina and Amanda, his 2 daughters, seem to be well put together professionals that won't be easily disturbed. We then get a little snippet from Jack's perspective, and he thinks that the war is almost won, but he is worried about bringing his daughters into the battle with him. With this, we learn that Jack is fully aware that there is a demon in his house. He's not oblivious to all of it. He is waging a silent war against hell itself with nothing but extraordinary apathy. On Christmas morning, the Yattering throws Amanda out of bed violently, and she panics and thinks she can see the demon, but Jack comes in and tells her that it was nothing and that she shouldn't worry. This is where we begin to see Jack gaslighting his daughters into thinking that everything is just totally normal in the house, and the Yattering breaks a vase and he says that, it's just the house settling. Because in order for Jack to win against what he is now certain is a lesser demon, he has to make sure that no one acknowledges it, and he just plays it cool like he always does. After opening presents, Amanda goes to check on the turkey in the oven, only for the turkey to come back to life and chase the family in the hallway where they shut the door behind them. And Jack is almost impressed with the inventiveness of the Yattering, and the Yattering retires to the attic, satisfied with his latest inventive idea, and he thinks he might be promoted for it. After resting for a while, the Yattering comes back down from the attic to find Gina and Amanda in the living room with Jack nowhere to be found, and this is the moment that he's been waiting for. The Yattering starts to spin the Christmas tree, like twirled around, and he starts to spin everything else in the room as well. The cabinets and the couch cushions and the light fixtures spin around like a massive tornado. Jack enters the room and tells his daughters to get out, and then he picks up a fireplace poker and starts to destroy every single piece of spinning furniture. He smashes the vases and busts down the cabinets, and he swats the pillows out of the air, and he's almost excited that the demon is being so bold because he wants it to show itself to him. Then the Christmas tree explodes. Pine needles go flying and stab themselves into Jack's skin, and the TV explodes after that and shards of hot glass burn him, and he retreats momentarily. Amanda asks him what's going on, and he lies and says that he doesn't know, and she can tell that he's lying and asks again, and Jack simply says that he thinks he'll go for a walk. Amanda's mind has just completely broken at this point. Gina is furious with Jack, who simply says that he can clean it all up later, but no one is more furious with Jack than the Yattering. Jack turns to the door and forces himself not to look back at his daughters because he knows that he will break down if he does, and he can't give the demon that satisfaction. He unlocks the door, and the Yattering locks it, and then he tries to unlock it again, and the Yattering bolts it shut yet again. And Jack looks at Gina, who gives him a knowing smile. Jack turns around and runs for the back door, and the Yattering stays ahead of him and locks it as he tries to unlock it. And then Jack quickly opens a window and the Yattering moves to close it. Jack then doubles back as the Yattering is fumbling with the window, and he runs to the front door that Gina has now unlocked for him, and he runs outside into the snowing street. The Yattering is furious beyond any anger that he has ever felt. There is nothing in his mind but the immediate destruction of Jack Polo. He sprints straight out the door and into the street. Jack can sense that the demon is behind him, and he runs for the gate and he tries to open it, and the Yattering closes it on him, and Jack simply says, "Que sera, sera." The Yattering loses it and goes to crush Jack's head, but it's forbidden for a demon to touch the soul it's meant to torment, and a white-hot pain shoots through his demonic hands. The Yattering screams, finally showing itself to Jack, who looks at it and laughs and celebrates his victory. The Yattering swears at him, but Jack says that the demon is now bound to him. He asks the Yattering to call him Mr. Polo from now on, and the Yattering replies, "Yes, Mr. Polo," and now that Jack has proven himself the better of the demon, he can use it to his advantage. He orders the Yattering to clean up the mess that he made inside, and the Yattering shamefully obeys it, but is confused that Jack doesn't ask for anything more, like the power of prophecy or the power of flight. Jack says that he simply wants the Yattering to clean up the house, nothing more. The Yattering then informs him that by consorting with the demon, he won't be let into heaven, and Jack just shrugs. He ends the story by saying that he isn't bothered by not being let into heaven, and he asks the Yattering what he always says, and the Yattering replies through gritted teeth, "Que sera, sera." And that's the end of the Yattering and Jack. I love this story a lot. I think it's really funny, and it's also super unique. The dynamic between the demon and Jack is really interesting. At first you think that Jack is just truly oblivious as to what's going on around him, but then you learn that he's fully aware that he's being tormented and he's trying to like stick it to the demon. I also love the comedy aspect of Jack trying to gaslight his daughters into believing there's nothing wrong when a cooked turkey is literally just come to life and then chase them through the house. And then the final satisfaction of him tricking the Yattering and having him act as his servant is a great way to end things. And then capping it off with Que Sera Sera was really clever as well. This story really shows just how versatile Barker can be as a writer. He mostly sticks with like the disturbing gory stuff, but whenever he branches out, it's always really great. He has a children's dark fantasy novel called The Thief of Always that is super good, and it shows just how great he is at writing for any audience. This story in particular is also cool because it has a similar premise to the C.S. Lewis novel, The Screwtape Letters. That's about a demon trying to tempt men and getting instruction from another demon. That book is much more focused on understanding how temptation works and the traps that human beings fall into, while this story is a lot wackier and more gruesome, but they're both great. And that's The Yattering and Jack. We've covered the first 3 stories so far, and we have 3 to go. On to the next one. Pig Blood Blues. So if the last story was a bit of a break that gave us something a little more lighthearted and fun, this next story brings us right back into the gory, violent, disturbing goodness. This story starts with a man named Neil Redman arriving at a juvenile detention facility for troubled youths, and he meets the facility's psychiatrist, Dr. Leverthal. Leverthal tells Redman that all of the staff refer to each other by their last names so as not to let the boys in on any of the details of their personal lives. She says that she has been sent to greet Redman in the absence of the governor that is usually in charge of the facilities but has been away recently. She also mentions that the funding for the facility has been drying up, and that has made the boys and staff more agitated than usual, and Redman seems unbothered by all of this. She tells him that he was hired to teach the boys because of his background in law enforcement. Redman was a police officer for 24 years, but he quit when they wanted him to take a desk job. Redman now sees himself as the token former law enforcement officer hired by the facility to appease the government funding agencies, and he isn't pleased with that. Leverthal says that all of the boys in the facility have committed criminal offenses, and most of them have serious aggressive tendencies, and Redman says that he will whip them into shape. But Leverthal says that the boys deserve sympathy and to have some degree of freedom. She seems to care for the boys, but Redman only sees them as punk kids. Leverthal shows him to his new office and excuses herself, and Redman walks down the hall and sees boys making obscene gestures at him, and then he hears a commotion. In the yard, there's a group of boys tackling another young boy and holding him down. He tries to wriggle free, and he's beaten by one of the boys on top of him, who's a tall, skinny boy that looks to be like 19. Leverthal identifies the boy on the ground, who's now dazed and bleeding from all over his mashed face, as Lacey, and she says that it's always Lacey, and the other boys say that he asked for it. A group of boys comes in with a stretcher and starts to cart Lacey away, and Redman asks furiously for the culprit to identify himself, but no one comes forward, and even Leverthal seems to keep her head down. As the boys are carting Lacey away, one of them looks at Redman and says, "That's the pig," and as soon as he says that, Lacey jerks up in his stretcher and stares Redman right in the eyes. I apologize if sometimes you can hear some loud engines outside. They're just some really cool people who drive some really cool loud cars. I love it. It's my favorite thing. But anyway, Redman spent the next couple of days setting up his workshop, and we learn that he has been hired to teach woodshop to the kids, and then he hears an alarm ring throughout the building. He runs up to the next floor of the main building and sees someone sprinting past him, and he grabs him and sees that it's Lacey, who tries to kick him, and then he relents. The guard catches up to Lacey, and Redman asks to know what's going on, and the guard says that Lacey tried to escape by climbing out a window in the bathroom. Redman asks to hear Lacey's side of the story, and Leverthal tries to intervene, saying that the governor will hear his story, and he presses Lacey, who says that Hennessy came back. Redman is confused, and Leverthal tells him that Lacey is mistaken. Hennessy is no longer with them, and she lights a cigarette and tells the guards to escort Lacey back to his room. Redman presses Leverthal, who tells him that Hennessy was another boy at the facility and a close friend of Lacey. He broke out and he hasn't been seen since, but Redman doesn't seem to believe this. He can tell there's something else going on. Something that I like about Redman's character is that he is incredibly skeptical of everything that is told to him. His background as a police officer has built kind of this natural distrust of the world around him. Barker is usually pretty good at making his main characters feel competent. It feels like they typically make pretty rational decisions even when faced with like the impossible world around them. Over the next few days, Redman seems to earn the respect of some of the boys, and they like that he doesn't really put up with any of their crap. He connects with them more than he does with the staff. During one of the classes, one of the boys mentions a farm, and Redman asks what he's talking about, and the boy points out the window to a small pig farm on the premises of the facility. Redmond was never told about the farm, and the boys tell him that he should probably stay away because it smells awful, but they all seem to laugh like there's an inside joke there among them. Redmond heads down to the farm later and sees that it just contains a couple of huts and a few small pigs, but it also smells absolutely terrible, and he turns to leave, but then he notices something. He sees a massive female pig, also referred to as a sow, and the sow looks at him, and Redmond is completely entranced with her, and he says that she is beautiful and perfect. The sow continues to stare at him, and Redmond starts to hope that he is making a good impression, and she turns away and he snaps out of the daze that he was in. It's kind of hard to express just how enamored Redmond is with the pig. It's like she hypnotizes him, and he also remarks that she hasn't eaten her slop that they've given her, and that she's not a glutton. He goes back to check on Lacey, who has been put in solitary confinement, and he asks Lacey about Hennessy, and he tells him that Hennessy has come back to the facility. Redmond asks where Hennessy is, and Lacey says that he's dead now and that he's everywhere. And Redmond is confused because he had been told that Hennessy escaped, and he asks how he died. Lacey tells him that he hanged himself in the pig hut, and he asks Redmond if he believes in ghosts, and Redmond says no, and Lacey tells him that he will soon see. We then shift to the perspective of the sow, and we learn that she is intelligent and that she requires a special kind of food. We also learn that she has eaten a few other pigs in the sty with her, notably her own children. Two boys approach the sty, and she reflects on her ability to speak to them and to coerce them. She says that she has coerced the younger boys to lay with her naked. Gross. The boys approach the sty nervously, and they know that they are not bringing the food that she desires, and they hope she is merciful. They present her with stale bacon for her to judge. She asks them why they haven't brought what she desires, and they say that the boy is being protected by the new teacher, Mr. Redmond, and it seems like Lacey is what she wants. She says that she will have him and orders the boys to bring him quickly, and one of them gets up and begins to feed her the bacon strip by strip. When he gets to the last strip, she lunges forward and bites off the fingers of the boy who is feeding her, and he whimpers in pain, and she excuses them, telling them to bring the boy next. She says that if they do not bring Lacey to her, she will come for him herself and eat him in bed, starting at his feet and then eating his legs, balls, and hips. Nasty stuff. We then shift back to Redmond, who is asking Leverthal about Hennessy, and she says that Hennessy is not dead, he simply escaped, and Redmond asks if he was suicidal. She says that he was actually the opposite. He believed that he would live forever and was obsessed with immortality, but then he escaped and they haven't seen him since. She starts to mention that he used to spend a lot of time at the pig farm, but then she stops herself, and Redmond asks why Lacey is being forced to take sedatives, but she just brushes it off. She says it's best if Redmond just learns the ropes and doesn't interfere with anything else at the facility. He's making enemies and that doesn't reflect well on him, and Redmond leaves. He passes the governor's office and remarks that it's been locked for the past week and he hasn't gotten a clear story on where he's at. And he returns to his office and finds Lacey. Lacey gives him a letter addressed to his mom and asks Redmond to deliver it, and Redmond asks why he can't just send it through the office like normal, and he says it's because they'll read it. He has tried to send letters in the past to his mom about what happened to Hennessy, but they were always destroyed by the facility, and a boy named Slape appears in the doorway of the classroom. He says there's a phone call for Redmond in the secretary's office, and Redmond tells him to wait with Lacey. Lacey looks worried and quietly mentions that Hennessy is in her now. Redmond takes the letter from Lacey and heads down to the secretary's office. Whoever called him got tired of waiting and didn't bother to leave a message because he doesn't hear the phone ringing, and he walks back to his office. On the way back, he notices that everything is oddly quiet. This is supposed to be the recreation hour for the boys, and they're always watching TV and being loud, but tonight it's silent. He heads back to his office and finds Slape, but no Lacey. And he asks why he let him go, and Slape says that Lacey ran off and he couldn't catch him. Redmond turns to go after Lacey, and Slape pulls out a knife and sticks the tip of it into Redmond's stomach. Redmond asks where Lacey is, and Slape says he's gone off to see Hennessy. He says that Hennessy never wanted to die, that he wanted to live forever. And Redmond hits the knife out of his hand, and the two of them struggle for a minute before Slape grabs the knife again. He starts to slash at Redmond, but Redmond dodges, and Slape starts crying and begging Hennessy to help him. Redmond tackles him and pushes him into the wall, and then he hears a stabbing sound. The knife has been accidentally driven into Slape, and he falls to the ground. And Redmond checks for a pulse and finds that he is dead. He leaves the room and reads Lacey's letter, which says, "Mama, they fed me to the pig. Don't believe them if they say I never loved you, or if they say I ran away. I never did. They fed me to the pig. I love you." Redmond heads down to the pig farm and creeps around the back. It's dark outside, but he can see several people standing in the sty, and among them are Leverthal and the other staff members surrounded by candles. He sees Lacey inside as well in the very back next to the sow, and he gets closer but is spotted by Leverthal, who just politely nods at him, and he sees the large sow approaching and everyone waits in silence. Redmond asks where Hennessy is, and they say that he's in the pig, and she ate him. They confirm that Hennessy hanged himself in the pigsty and was eaten and now speaks through her. Leverthal says that she and Hennessy were in love and that he was 18 and never wanted to be a man, so he hanged himself. And it was 6 days before they found what was left of him. Lacey is on the ground near the back of the sty, and Leverthal tells Redmond that he can go after him if he wants, but he'll have to make his way through the sow. Redmond is grabbed by one of the kids and shown the sty with the straw on the ground and lit candles surrounding the area like some sort of ritual, and Redmond springs into action. He elbows the boy that's holding him and shakes himself free. Leverthal grabs him and he yanks her around, and her hair brushes the flame of one of the candles and lights her head on fire. She screams and falls to the ground, which lights the straw on the ground, and the fire spreads and surrounds the sow, who then gets lit on fire and screams in agony. She runs out of the sty, trampling Leverthal, and the other boys chase after her. Redmond enters the back of the sty and finds Lacey laying on the ground but still alive. Redmond helps Lacey up, who seems to be disoriented and scared. And as Redmond stands up, he brushes against something and then feels a rain of small worms on his head and shoulders. He looks around in horror to find the rotted corpse of Hennessy still hanging from his rope. His body has been devoured up to his waist by the sow because she couldn't reach any higher after that. He drags Lacey with him to the main building, and all the lights are off, and he goes to find the phone in the secretary's office, but it's been completely smashed to smithereens. Lacey is acting strange at this point. He's silent, and he almost seems to be like sniffing around, and he bites down on Redmond's hand, who lets him go, then Lacey crawls away. Redmond goes to the governor's office, where he knows there's another phone that he can use to call the police with. He breaks the door open and finds the governor long dead with his heart eaten out of his chest. There is straw on the floor of the office, so no doubt this was the sow's doing. Horrified, Redmond turns away and is hit in the face by someone, breaking his nose and cheekbone. He wakes up later in the recreation room, and there are candles all around the room, and he hears the low sound of chanting, and then he hears the sow approaching. She enters the room, burned and charred and weak. Her breathing is heavy. She marches forward towards him, and he sees that Lacey is riding her. He is completely naked and guiding her to Redmond. Redmond tries to get Lacey's attention, but it seems that he can't hear him. He now acts as the eyes and ears of the badly wounded sow, and Redmond feels a rope around his neck. He is hoisted into the air, and Lacey and the sow approach. Lacey climbs down, and Redmond sees that he's wearing a rope around his waist, almost like a pigtail. The sow looks up and speaks, and this is the last paragraph of the story. "This is the state of the beast," it said, "to eat and be eaten." Then the sow smiled, and Redmond felt, though he had believed himself numb, the first shock of pain as Lacey's teeth bit off a piece from his foot, and the boy clambered, snorting up his savior's body to kiss out his life. And that is Pig Blood Blues. It's one of my favorite stories in this entire collection. It's so unique, and I'm not entirely sure of what's going on. It seems like Lacey maybe became the pig. We know that the pig ate Hennessy and that the pig can communicate with people, but then Lacey seems to act like a pig at the end, which makes me think he's now one with the sow. Others have speculated that since Lacey was laying with the sow, he might have become a piglet in a sense, and now he's eating Redmond as a sacrifice to the sow. There are certainly a few different interpretations, but the horror is genius either way. The image of the half-eaten corpse of Hennessy in the pigsty is really eerie. I always love stories like The Wicker Man, where everyone is in on something crazy and the main character doesn't realize it. This story does that incredibly well, and I'm shocked there isn't a movie for it, at least that I'm not aware of. It seems like prime material to make an adaptation of. Definitely one of the more wild stories in here, and there's actually quite a bit that I didn't even cover. There are some personal details about Redmond that aren't necessary but are interesting. So definitely go check it out if you're interested. On to the next story. Sex, Death, and Starshine. This next story plays out much more like a drama than the stories that have come before. This one is almost cozy, at least as cozy as a Clive Barker story can be. The story mainly centers around Terry, who is the director of a play at the Elysium Theater. He also happens to be having an affair with the lead actress, Diane. Diane is not a great actress, but she is famous. She's the star of a terrible soap opera and was brought into the theater to draw crowds for their production of Twelfth Night, which is a Shakespeare play. The rest of the cast and crew are upset at the arrangement because they know that Diane doesn't have the skill set to perform the lead role, and they know that Terry is sleeping with her. This has led to some tension among Terry and everyone else. The play is just going along terribly in general. The show is only a week away, and he can't get rid of Diane because he loves her. I'm going to leave out a good amount of the sex between Diane and Terry. Just know there's a lot of it, most of it in dressing rooms. It's not always explicit, but there is one scene that's kind of detailed. There's just a lot of it. But back in the theater, Terry makes it through rehearsal and notices two figures obscured in the shadows watching the rehearsal, and they leave after it's finished. Terry goes to talk to the owner of the theater, Hammersmith, and he asks if he knows the people that were watching the rehearsal. He says that he isn't sure, and he doesn't really pay much attention. Hammersmith is pretty cold towards Terry and the entire production. He's losing money on it, and he knows that Diane is no good in the role, and this has led to some tension between the two men. He goes to find the front of house manager, a lady named Tallulah, but he can't find her. And then he is approached by a soft-spoken, polite man dressed in a gray suit. The man is wearing a hat and Terry can't see his face clearly, and the man introduces himself as Litchfield, a lover of the arts and a regular at the Elysium Theater from years ago. Litchfield tells Terry that the 12th night will be the final production at the Elysium. The theater will be closing afterwards, and Terry isn't surprised, but he's still bothered by this news. Litchfield says that Hammersmith is the one who made the decision, that he's been planning this for a while. The theater is no longer turning a profit, and so the show must stop. He says that he is a trustee of the theater and was once married to Constantia, the star of the show back in the day. He then tells Terry that he wants to see the theater die a good death. He uses the phrase, "We should have never given up Dionysus for Apollo," which roughly means that we shouldn't have yielded the arts to the pursuit of wealth and pragmatism. He tells Terry that Diane is no good in the role of Viola, and Terry agrees but says that she's popular. Diane approaches Terry and asks who he's talking to, because she can't see that Litchfield has slipped away. The next day, Terry leads an awful rehearsal. The blocking is off, and Diane is terrible in the role of Viola. And when the rehearsal ends, Terry is approached by Tallulah. She tells him that Litchfield wasn't pleased with the rehearsal, and this catches Terry by surprise, not because the rehearsal wasn't terrible, but because he didn't see Litchfield watching them at all. Tallulah says that 12th Night is very dear to Litchfield's heart, because his late wife, Constantia, was a brilliant Viola, but she died young of cancer. Terry leaves for the night, and Tallulah thinks of how magnificent Constantia was and starts to tear up. She then hears Litchfield calling her name. She turns around to see Litchfield standing behind her with Constantia next to him. She is young and beautiful and everything that she was all those years ago, and Tallulah is elated. The next day, rehearsal goes just as poorly. The show opens the next day, and Diane doesn't know her lines, so she storms off into the dressing room in tears. Terry follows her, and she says that she's useless, and he reassures her and says that she's a great actress, and the two begin to fool around, and then Litchfield just opens the door on them. Terry is literally caught with his pants around his ankles, and he pulls them up with embarrassment, and Litchfield says that he wants to work with Diane, and Terry pulls him aside. He stands up for Diane and says that she'll be the one to perform tomorrow, and he notices there's something artificial about Litchfield's face, like the skin is like rigid and unmoving. Litchfield says that he just wants what's best for the production, and that he'll be as meek as a lamb with Diane. Terry tells him that he's no lamb, and then he leaves to go to a bar. Litchfield enters Diane's dressing room and tells her that she is no good as Viola. She is furious at this and yells at him to get out, and she threatens to call the manager. He says that his wife has played Viola and that she could breathe more life into the production. Diane is completely indignant and tells him that the role is hers and hers alone. She approaches him and sees that his face appears to be rubbery like latex, and she yanks his mask off and sees that his true face is that of a dead man. He has a couple thin, stringy lines of muscle connecting some of his skeletal structure. He has a little bit of stubble hanging from the flap of skin where his chin should be. He's a walking corpse. Diane silently stares in horror, and Litchfield says that unlike Constantia, he wasn't embalmed, so now he has to cover his face with this latex. He asks her if she really wants to live in the arts, and she shakes her head. And he asks her if she wants the life of the body, not the life of imagination, and she says that she does. Then he pulls her hair, brings her mouth to his, and sucks the life out of her. And she is found unconscious by a stagehand who can sense that she's not quite dead, but also not quite living. She is taken to the hospital and is said to be in a coma. Terry approaches Hammersmith, who tells him that he is canceling the production of The 12th Night. Litchfield then appears and says that Constantia can play the part and argues with Hammersmith, who reluctantly lets him put on one last show before he demolishes the building. With Constantia playing the lead, Litchfield requests that the show lights be turned down and that all of the scenes of Constantia touching or kissing anyone be reworked, and Terry agrees. The final rehearsal goes very well. Constantia knows all of her lines and blocking, and the production crew seems happy with their new leading lady. After rehearsal, Litchfield approaches Tallulah and says that it will happen tonight. Tallulah is excited and asks if it hurts to die. Litchfield says no, and then he approaches her. He sucks the life out of her just like he did with Diane, and Tallulah falls to the ground dead. Later that night, before the show, Diane gets out of a taxi and approaches Terry. She takes him to the dressing room, and the two of them start to get it on. And Terry notices that she is icy cold and eventually puts it all together that Diane is dead. She says that she died 2 hours ago in her sleep and came back to attend to some unfinished business, and she pulls something silver and sharp from her bag. We then see that in the cemetery, the bodies of the dead start to climb out of their coffins and mausoleums, and all of them head, impeccably dressed, to the Elysium Theater. The show is a massive hit. Constantia is brilliant in the role, and the silent Walking Dead watch the show. It's a packed house, and Hammersmith is over the moon about it. During the show, however, Terry walks into Hammersmith's office and finds him crying. And he says that Diane is dead and that the Elysium will be investigated, but Terry doesn't seem to mind. Hammersmith insults him and then notices the sharp silver nail file sticking out of his skull. He is surely dead, but he's just walking around like it's nothing. He approaches Hammersmith, grabs him by the tie, calls him a Philistine, and snaps his neck. The show finishes and the actors take their bows, and then the fire starts. The Elysium is burned to the ground and several bodies are discovered. Diane, who had already been pronounced dead, Hammersmith, and then several other members of the production. We then see that some of the other members of the crew are now dead and have joined Terry and Litchfield as a sort of traveling theater troupe of the undead. They stand on the side of the highway and look to commandeer a truck that will carry all of them onto the next stage that they'll perform on, because no one can refuse Constantia's beauty. Terry asks Litchfield what will happen if someone approaches the dead troupe, and he responds with, "Play life, of course, and smile." And with that, the story ends. This one definitely has a different feel to it than what has come before. It's a little slower and has much more to do with like the drama of the theater and like Diane and Terry's relationship. I like the theme that the dead are essentially reclaiming the art of the theater for the artists rather than like acting as the pragmatists would want them to act. They don't see their art as a way to like turn a profit, but as an expression of the essence of life. Litchfield sees Diane as a mockery of their art since she was hired for financial reasons and not on merit of her talent. The ending is also cool with the troupe continuing on. It doesn't seem like there's a particular reason that the dead have risen, but maybe I missed something in the story. Barker will kind of oscillate between explaining the mechanics of the worlds that he builds and then like leaving it up to the reader to decide. It's a really good balance in my opinion. I love his stories like The Hellbound Heart, where we are told that like the Cenobites are summoned by this mysterious box and there are like rules to their existence. I think that's all super cool when it's all structured. But sometimes it's interesting to see a story where people are put into danger by completely unexpected and unexplained coincidences. This next story falls into that category. I will say that Sex, Death, and Starshine is probably his most explicit sexual story. There's a scene near the end with Diane and Terry that is more descriptive than usual, so be warned. But I like how the story looks at the commercialization of art with like this paranormal twist to it. It was a lot of fun to revisit for this video. On to the last story. In the Hills, the Cities. This story is for sure the most insane one in this volume and maybe even in the whole collection. I'm not exaggerating. This is truly almost something that Clive Barker could come up with. It has the perfect mix of goofy and terrifying to me. The story is about two men named Mick and Judd that are essentially taking a honeymoon through the former Soviet Union. The story starts with the two men driving through Yugoslavia, and Mick appears to already be growing tired of Judd, who constantly drones on about politics and is a lot more right-wing than Mick thought he would have been. Judd just can't stop talking about boring politics, and Mick decides that he'll ditch him after their honeymoon. But Judd is also unhappy with Mick because he doesn't see him on the same level as him intellectually. The two are driving to a monastery that Mick wants to see, and Judd starts to argue, saying that all of the monasteries are the same and it doesn't really matter and this stuff's not really important. It's kind of a play on what we talked about in the last story of like this mix of like art against like pragmatism. In the case, it's like politics versus art and religion. It's kind of an interesting dichotomy that Barker explores in a lot of his stories. Mick then yells at Judd to stop the car and seduces Judd, and the two of them make love in the wheat field that they're driving through. We then shift to the point of view of a Soviet Union leader who seems to be preparing his and the neighboring cities for some kind of celebration. He remarks that they feel blessed to live in the Soviet Union. He scoffs at the Americans with their simple pleasures. We then go back to Mick and Judd, who stay at a bed and breakfast, and they head out onto the road the next day. But they get lost a couple hours in and they refer to their map. But then they look around them and they can see civilians marching in the distance in almost like herds. We then hear from the Soviet leader that explains that his city and the neighboring city are about to engage in ritual war. Every single member of the city is assembling on the battleground, and the two are getting ready to fight each other to the death as cities. But something that's interesting is that the Soviet leader mentions that these civilians join in on this enthusiastically. They're not really forced into the conflict, they just enjoy the battle. But this is a Clive Barker story. You guys know how I feel about Clive Barker. So this can't just be warfare between two cities. No, in this story, every single member of the city links up to form like one giant person. Like they have harnesses all over this thing and they form one giant man who's like insanely tall, like literally like a Rock'em Sock'em robot, and he just runs at the other guy. It's crazy. I don't know how it works. They don't really explain how it works, but that's just how these people fight each other. They all link up into one giant person and fight to the death. It's wild. But anyways, Judd and Mick are still lost on the road. They kind of move on after seeing the people walking, but then they hear these like loud, banging, thunderous sounds. And those are the sounds of the two cities like fighting each other and punching each other. We're then told about how one of the cities defeats the other, and it leaves all 30,000 people that made up the city conjoined into this like defeated pile of bloody human gore and crushed people and people moaning and suffering. It's all very gross. Judd wants to investigate the sounds, but Mick just says to leave it alone. And Judd gets out of the car and they come upon this massive pile of dead and dying bodies. We see men, women, and children piled up and moaning in pain, and there's blood everywhere and they're all broken and it's all very gross, and a man walks from body to body, shooting the living in the head to end their suffering. Judd tries to ask the man what happened, but the man doesn't speak English, and he simply takes his revolver and shoots himself on the head, ending his own life. One thing that I do like about this story is that when they go up to talk to him, he just doesn't speak English, which is very realistic. I feel like in a lot of other stories, he would have given some like cryptic, mysterious answer that we would have like had to think about, but instead he's just like, I don't speak English, I can't talk to you, and then he shoots himself. Mick and Judd race back to their car, but it's being stolen by the Soviet leader that we talked about from earlier, who wasn't in one of the massive cities, he was just watching the affair. He says that he was the referee for the battle, but now he's worried that the massive city person that has won the fight is on its way to destroy more cities, and he can't let that happen. He drives away in the car, and the couple runs after him, and they find him that night having driven the car into a sinkhole. And he's laying in there broken and dying, but before he dies, he explains to them about this giant city made of human flesh. And he says that they have perfected their design, and now the giant will roam the earth, killing everything in its path. And like I've talked about how this story is kind of goofy, and I think it is, but also like the idea of seeing, like think about like this massive building-sized thing walking towards you, that's pretty terrifying to me. I once saw an animation that somebody made of like, it was like looking over the ocean on a beach, and then you just saw like Cthulhu raise out of the water and being like impossibly large. That actually kind of freaked me out a bit. And now I live on the beach, and every time I look out, I just imagine what I would do if I saw like an impossibly massive creature rise from it. It's like a weird fear that was unlocked by that stupid video that I watched. But anyway, the men think that this man is insane, because why would you not think he was insane? And they head into the hills where they find a small farmhouse. Inside the farmhouse, a woman and her husband treat the men to some dinner. They seem like really nice people. And the two men pass out at the table, just completely exhausted. They wake to the sound of the crashing, terrible, thunderous footsteps, and the giant is approaching. The husband and wife panic, and they run out of the house to hopefully get a better view of what's coming after them, and they are crushed by the giant. And then the house falls down, and Mick and Judd are left to stare up at this horrifying monstrosity in complete awe. The debris of the cottage is kicked by the giant, and a piece of stone flies and hits Judd in the head, instantly killing him. But Mick is too enamored with the giant to care. He's like looking up at this thing in wonder and awe. And he notices that the giant is made of so many people, and that several of them have died at this point. Their lifeless bodies hang from these harnesses as the entire giant moves on as one, not paying any heed to the dead people that are part of it. And the story ends with Mick hitching a ride on the giant's foot and being absorbed into it. And he is happy and glad to be part of this new whole. And the giant continues on, presumably to kill and destroy everything in its path. I told you it was absolutely insane, didn't I? The giant, like, human rock'em sock'em robots was definitely not what I was expecting when I read this for the first time, but I think they're actually really well done. Like I said, I typically find the story to be more goofy than actually terrifying, but there is something scary about seeing this massive thing approaching you, and I think there is something that the story is saying about, like, wanting to be part of the greater whole rather than being alone. Like, Mick is ecstatic to join this massive city as it moves through the country, destroying everything in its path. And he isn't really bothered when Judd dies because he feels like he has found his calling in life now. The story just goes to show how truly creative and imaginative Barker is as a writer. He pulls these wild ideas out of his head and manages to craft some really well-written stories from them. But that is it for Books of Blood Volume 1. If these sounded interesting to you, then please do yourself a favor and buy the other volumes. They're all great. My plan is to make 5 more videos like this one covering the other 5 volumes and all their stories with this exact same format. So if you'd be interested in that, then please let me know in the comments below. If you're someone who found this channel through my internet horror videos like the SCP video, the This Thing a Quiet Madness made video, or like the Pen Pal video or the Creepypasta Iceberg, then definitely check out these Books of Blood stories. I plan on covering more internet horror stories in the near future and probably more SCPs, but I also hope that I'm able to introduce some more people to kind of this like classic or more established horror literature, because I think it's very underappreciated in my opinion. I started out reading like creepypastas and SCPs, and I have a ton of fun reading them. I really enjoy them, but reading some of this horror literature and like seeing where some of my favorite online stories take their inspiration from is a really like fun and rewarding experience. I think it's amazing that the internet has kind of cultivated this new culture of anybody can write horror stories, and I think we shouldn't have any barriers to entry. I think that's really great. But again, some of these older stories, kind of these roots of horror, are really amazing to read, and they've just always impressed me a whole ton. I love reading through all these. So seriously, if you're somebody who reads, like if you really liked Pen Pal, if you really like my SCP video, go read some of these classic horror novels because they're a ton of fun. Also, if you haven't subscribed yet, then please do. My goal is to hit 50,000 subs by the end of the year, and it kind of looks like I'm on track to hit that, so thank you for everybody who's already subbed. The support's been wild so far. I make videos on horror literature and other horror and all sorts of crazy topics that I find particularly interesting. If you want to support me further, then consider becoming a channel member where you will get early access to all my videos, access to all my individual book reviews, and access to my monthly book club. An enormous thank you to all of my lovely channel members whose names you're seeing on the screen right now, wherever I'm putting them, I don't know that yet. And an extra special thank you to all my gold tier members, Amanda Mapes, Lucas Fernando, Chris Lamb, Silent Trails, Blue Radio Media, Ezra, Coco Boko, Tyler the Leper, Lexi, Vix Corner, B, Pyrocat, Miss Joy 16, Jenna Berry, Cherry Shark, Saddest John, Moonsong Blog, Starlight Pink, Jack Samore, and Amanda Castillon. Your support really does mean the absolute world to me, not only the channel members, but from everybody. And it just allows me to spend even more time making videos for this channel, which again, I really love doing. This has been my dream for a really long time. And I'm just so glad you guys are all watching and you seem to enjoy this stuff. Thanks again to everybody for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. See ya.